Hello everybody, today we are painting the Beastboss on Squigosaur. Let's gather the wild energy, grab our brushes, and get painting. Today we're going to start with our Squig. We're going bright and vibrant for him. To start off with, we're going to base coat with corn red, making sure to leave his belly unpainted. Squigs typically aren't my side of the army. I typically prefer the junkyard aesthetic in vehicles, but for Orktober, exceptions must be made. We are then going to paint the belly of the beast, starting with a dark, warm flesh. This will bring in a peachy flesh tone that contrasts nicely against the red hide, and is going to bring a lot of brightness and vibrancy to our paint job. To blend our two colors and give us a gradient, we can wet blend the two colors together. So go ahead and grab your corn red and push it, starting from the red into the skin tone. Then take your skin tone and slowly push and pull the two into one another. This is going to create us a smooth gradient in very little time. If you're interested in wet blending, check out a few of my previous videos for the Dredge Marines, where I go more in depth about the technique. As we begin to brighten this model up, we can use dry brushing as our technique. With the size of this model and the amount of ridges that we've got, this is an excellent way to do this that leaves behind just a bit of our brighter tone, but still leaves our recesses dark. The first pass of our dry brushing is going to be with Mephiston Red, and then second pass will be with Evil Sun Scarlet, taking up about 50% less area from the Mephiston, and then finally finishing up with Wild Rider Red as just the topmost edges, probably about 10 to 15% of the entire model. So with orks, they were really my first army for Warhammer 40,000. They inspired me to start this channel, as you can tell by the name, and have really driven my growth as a painter. The ramshackle and disorganized nature of the army allowed for me to experiment with different styles, techniques, and still end up with a cohesive army that I'm proud of. I'll never forget going from painting Stormcast Eternals all uniformly to painting up my first box of Ork Commandos, and the freedom of that really inspired me to collect them and play them as my primary army. To get some more contrast going, we're going to use an orc trick that I've used across my entire army. That's going to be purple tones for the mouth. For this squig, we're going to base coat the tongue and mouth in Naggaroth Night. When you have a model this size, doing a traditional acrylic wash is really tough and time consuming, but we still want to have a lot of depth to our paint job, so the best place to turn is to an oil wash. For this guy, we're going to go for a deep purple, squeezing out some purple oil paint into a cup and then following it with just a touch of a dark blue oil. Once we have that, we can mix in about a shot of white spirits. This is going to activate the oil and allow them to thin out and create our wash. The amounts used here are really dependent on kind of your personal preference. If you want a heavier wash and more impactful, add less of the white spirit. And if you want something thinner, go ahead and add a little bit more, and that'll get you your desired result. To apply this wash, you can really just slop it on across the model. Oil washes tend to really slip and slide and get into your deepest recesses with a little effort, so don't worry if it doesn't look exactly like how you want it, you can always just clean it up in this next step. Once you've given it just a minute to dry, we can take up a makeup sponge, dip it in just a bit of white spirit, and then gently drag it across the surface of the model. This is going to pull up the wash, so I'm going to focus this in areas where I want it to be brighter and more vibrant. With the squig mostly done, we're going to go ahead and start in our orc skin. As with all of my paint jobs, time is a factor here. I've got a 4-month-old at home, so time is precious. I want to be focusing on 1 to 2 aspects of models to really go full in on. So for this model, it's going to be the squig and the orc skin. We're going for a more vibrant and poppy skin, so we'll start with a base warpstone glow. To continue highlighting, we're going to mix about a 50-50 moot green and warpstone glow, slowly applying this to our skin and ramping up the intensity, just adding in more moot green to get a smooth result and a nice gentle gradient with little effort. With time being a factor, you can always layer this and worry less about a gradient, but as this is a hero model, I'm going to spend a bit more time here and use some glazing. When highlighting, we are looking particularly where the light is going to be hitting. So on the face, that's going to be your areas like your brow and cheekbones. On the arms, this is going to be your tops of your muscle groups. Make sure when doing muscles to push the highlight all the way to the edge of the recess. The final look will look much more coherent that way. For the teeth of both our Squig and Ork, we're going to use a base coat of Rhinox hide just to establish a nice warm brown base tone. Once we've base coated this, we can hit our teeth with some Morghast bone. Similarly to doing horns, we can drag our brush tip towards the tip of the tooth, leaving behind the most paint at the tips of each tooth. I like to drag it in thin lines just to give our teeth a little bit of extra texture. And back into our orc skin. Not sure why I jumped to something else, but it's the nature of the beast. We're going to hit the corners and upward facing edges with pure moot green. Our past steps should have set us up for a smooth gradient here, so this will look nice and natural, and everything will flow coherently. Although a lot of the orcs in my army have totally different skin tones from one another, there is one consistency that I make sure to keep on all my orcs. Bugman's glow for the mouths and fleshy bits like the scars. This contrasts really nicely against the green and gives us a bit of warmth to the skin and reintroduces the fact that these are living creatures. We can then hit the mouth of our orc and the eyes of our squig with a purple wash to give them some depth and keep up the contrast. For our orc eyes, I base coat with a Wild Rider red and then do a dot of Bad Moon's yellow for the pupil. And for the squig, I do Bad Moon's yellow with a black Templar pupil in the shape of a cat eye. Onto our other details. For the pelt, belt, and leather details, we can base coat in black Templar contrast, water down about 2:1 with contrast medium. It's another little time saver that we're going to do here. And this is going to give us a good base, but also leave some brightness on the tips of the fur and belts, allowing us less steps in the future. We are painting this guy in a Goth scheme, so for our armor plates, we're starting out with a blue-black, and then going to dull this out with a little bit of Nuln Oil. I know some people are going to say, hey, it's black, not blue for Goths, but it looks dark, and if we did black for the panels as well, it's all going to kind of gel together in, the black of the pelt, the black of the armor. We're just going to have a black blob on top of our orc with no real differentiation or contrast. For our pants, it's just going to be a simple base coat of Mechanicus Standard Gray. Recently, I've been really enjoying the Speed Paint Metallics, so we're going to give another one a shot, and today it's going to be the Enchanted Steel. Overall, I think it worked really well. It allowed me to slap it on over the leg, guns, and other metallic details with no real issue. I didn't thin it, I just used it straight out of the bottle, and I'm honestly really happy with this quick result. If you've seen any of my other videos, you know that metallics aren't my favorite thing, but they're one material that likely will appear just about on every model for the hobby, so if I can find a way to shave off 10 minutes of metallic base coating, I'll take it. This wouldn't be a Goth character without checkerboarding. I'm going to put a big checkerboard on his big leg panel, so to do this, we're going to base coat with Gray Sear. Get this thin down to the point where it'll easily flow off your brush, same process as any freehanding, and then drag it to create the lines of our grid. Make sure you have a fine tip brush for this, it'll work it a lot easier. This isn't going to be perfect right off the rip, but once you have your initial squares colored in, you can go back in with a blue-black to even them out. To break up our metallics, I'm going to use Balthazar Gold. The name is deceiving, it's actually a coppery bronze color, so it does this job quite well. To highlight our armor panels, I just did a quick edge highlight with Fenrisian Gray. If you haven't noticed, I don't do a whole lot of edge highlighting, but for defining hard lines on armor panels especially, it works really well. For rust effects, I'm using my favorite product, Dirty Down Rust. This thing's like magic in a bottle, you just really have to make sure to stir it and shake it really well. Once you have it ready to use it similar to a wash and apply it to places that you want rust. If you apply too much, it's really easy, all you have to do is get a little bit of water on your brush and then scrub at it, and it'll kind of feather out and make more of an easy gradient than what it previously is just by itself. To tie all of our metallic details together and do a little bit of cheap, on the time side, weathering, we can dry brush with silver. If we focus on the edges of our black armor plates, it also gives us an effect as though our black paint is worn away. This takes about 2 seconds to do the entire model, super quick, super easy, and it looks great. Let's finish this bad boy up. For our spit, we're going to do a cool resin effect, but to start, we can do this blob in a bit of Gray Sear. I intentionally let a little bit of our color spill onto it, because now if we thin our gray, it'll look a little translucent. Before we do our UV, we're going to finish our base though. To do this, I'm going to use some pigment powders. First, a dark yellow ochre for that Mad Max style Badlands. Then on the edges of the rock cliffs and stuff that I've established, I do a burnt umber to give us some definition. The majority of this base is just going to be cork with a little bit of texture paste on top as well. With pigments, it's really easy to apply. You just get some on a brush and then jam them wherever you want, kind of spread them out with the tip of your brush, let them feather out, and then they settle in the recesses and give us a nice dusty look. Also, want to make sure that we get it on our feet of our model. I also put some on the boots, just to make sure that it kind of all gels together, shows that our orc's been up and walking around. It doesn't always just stick on top of the squig. For the resin, I'm going to start a drip at the mouth and then allow it to slowly work its way down, just using gravity to do this. I want it to run off here just a little bit before I blast it with UV to start hardening. I want it to be a big glob on the end of this actual little spit drip, just that way it gives a nice image of slobber everywhere. The reason I did the base already was to allow for the resin to drip onto the base as if our squig is just leaving a trail behind him. And the final step of any paint job is to hit it with a black base rim. I just use whatever cheap craft store black paint I can use. Doesn't have to be expensive, any black will do. And we're finished. I've had a few other projects going on, so it took me a minute before I could really sit down and knock out one of my boys for Orktober. But it's truly a holiday that I couldn't miss, and I'm happy I was able to get it out right before the end of the month. They truly are my favorite army in Warhammer, and realistically, they're really the only guys having a good time in the 41st millennium. I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you did, please consider leaving a like, subscribing, and leaving a comment. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Have a good one.